Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Yerushalmi Truma is Pedig Tes Halacha Aleph. We are in middle of the Mishnah. We're learning today Daf Pei Vav. We're going to start 4 lines from the top of the Amid. In the beginning of the line, V'chayeves b'maiser. Quickly reviewing that Truma has to be eaten, maybe smeared if it's something that's usually used that way, but a product of Truma is not allowed to be planted. Came along the Chachamim and said that if someone went ahead and planted it, they made 2 gezeras. Number 1, ideally, you're going to get punished. You have to uproot it. Now, really, we learned in the Mishnah, there's a nuance. If everyone knew that what you planted was truma, and we use the words marasayin, so it's known, it becomes known that this is a field in which truma was planted. If you're going to go ahead and uproot it, people are going to think that one is allowed to destroy truma and one is not. Be'emes, when you plant something, the seed, most of them decomposes. Prior to the new growth reaching a third, even though we say gedule truma, there is no truma here. It's not yet considered an item, a product. So be'emes, uprooting it won't be an act of destruction, but it will appear that way. So therefore, if people know that what you planted is truma, b'mezid, you can't uproot it. But b'shoigeg, you yourself did not know that you're planting truma. Probably no one else knows, even now that you discovered. In that case, penalty number 1 is yupach, and penalty number 2, whether it was b'mezid or even b'shoigeg, you are only allowed to uproot it up until when it reaches a third. Once the growth reaches a third, since the Chachamim said gedule truma up, so now that it has a status of rabbinic truma, destroying it is prohibited. So you're not allowed to destroy it. Eloma truma. Now, as we learned in the Mishnah, it doesn't mean it's mamish truma. Mamish truma does not need to have from it like a chikha peya left. Real truma doesn't have anything from it separated regarding all of the other tithes. Right? The coin doesn't separate from what the coin receives. Ma'aser v'chulei. You don't do that. So really, gedule truma only means that non-kohanim cannot eat it. But as far as all of the other dinim, it has a din of tevel. And indeed, the Mishnah says that if you have leked shikhopeya, you have to leave it. And the only thing is, since midrabanan it has a status of truma, if a non-kohen, ani, is going to gather, let's say, the shikha, he's not allowed to eat it, but he can sell it. So the value he makes use of. But we always apply the rule that eating gedulei truma can only be eaten by kohanim. This is where we left. And then we had a 3-way machlokes. Can the Chachamim say even Aniyah Yisrael can gather it? Rabbi Tarfon says, no, we are afraid that the Aniyah Yisrael will accidentally eat it, but it's truma. So only Aniyeh Kohanim can eat it. Then we had Rabbi Akiva. We interpreted Rabbi Akiva that he is a third opinion when we learned the Mishnah. Actually, later in the Gemara, we're going to see, based on a correction of the words of the Girsa of what Rabbi Akiva says, we're going to clarify what Rabbi Akiva really holds. We'll get to that when we learn the Gemara inside, but we are in middle of the Mishnah. And I just want to mention that there's another big question that we have to deal with this gedule truma. Chevra, when people thresh, remember, truma not only is not allowed to be eaten by non-kohanim, but truma product that is Michael Adam is not allowed to be eaten by animals. On the other hand, there is a biblical obligation that when I am threshing with my animal, the product that is being threshed has to be available to my animal. I'm not allowed to muzzle my animal. So now the question will be, this has a status of rabbinic truma, which means midoi raisa, it's not truma. Midoi raisa, you're not allowed to muzzle the animal. If you're not going to muzzle the animal is going to eat. But midrabanan, it has a din of truma. Animals are not allowed to eat truma. You got yourself a problem that the Mishnah will resolve, and there's a lot to say about that. We're going to have a great application of the rule in the Gemara later of hapesha asar hu hapesha hitir. We're going to have various inquiries in the Gemara whether the penalty of yupach in the Mishnah, b'shoigeg yupach, is only on biblical truma, is it also on rabbinic truma, and we're going to have an application of the rule that ein goizrin gezeda ligezeda. right? Generally. We're going to go through the three-way machlekes, shitas chachamim, and the Gemara, shitas Rab Tarfon, shitas Rab Akiva, like we said. And finally, God willing, when we'll get at the end of today's daf, the Mishnah spoke about the tithing obligation of this Gedulei Truma. That's where we're going to start off today. What are the tithing obligations? Since Be'emes Gedulei Truma doesn't mamish mean it's Truma, it only means it's Truma that non-Kohanim cannot eat it. The Gemara will bring a brisa that will discuss the obligations as they pertain to Gedulei Meiser Rishon, the same concept. In other words, if someone had Meiser Rishon and they didn't yet take away Trumas Meiser, and they planted it, so what will be the status of that which grows? Will we not only have to tithe that which grows for itself, but will we also have to tithe the original, the Trumas Meiser that we didn't do prior to planting it, and other such details? We'll leave it at that. Chevra Daf Pevav, 4 lines from the top and the beginning of the line. So we're speaking about Gedulei Truma. It was not uprooted. So now the Mishnah says that the Chayeves b'Meiser, Meiser both means Meiser Rishon, and Meiser means Meiser Sheni. And during the 3rd and 6th year, Meiser Ani. This is very important. So Nachamol, it's not Pshat that Gedulei Truma is Mamish Truma. If that would be the case, Truma is good to go. When the Kohen gets Truma, he eats it. Nothing needs to be separated from Truma. But since, as we just learned, you're chayiv to leave leket shikhopeya, which means Gedulei Truma, it's like a penalty. It means that a non-Kohen cannot eat it. But the din that midoiraisa, it's tevel, remains. Tevel has to have everything removed from it. And for the record, even though the Mishnah says v'chayeves b'meiser, some have a girsa in the Mishnah v'chayeves betruma ubemeiser ani. And even if you don't have that girsa, as a rule, many a time when the Tanoim use the word meiser, it's a generic word including that has truma included in it. In other words, you have to separate from it truma. Now, you have to appreciate. Truma, you're going to give to the Kohen, so it's no problem. But when you separate Meiser Rishon and you give it to the Levi, again, you have to separate Meiser and give it to the Levi. Mitzat Sheni, Gedulei Truma. So the Levi will own it, but he will not be allowed to eat it. He can sell it to make Truma Bezoil to a Kohen. Same thing will be with the Meiser Ani. Same thing will be with the Meiser Sheni. I want to go through all these details. So let's go to the Mishnah. Va'aniye Yisrael, va'aniye kohanim noitlin. We're speaking about the Meiser Ani. This goes back to the sheet of the Chachamim. They're not concerned that what that someone will accidentally eat it. Others say that this goes lekula alma. Even Rabbi Tarfon that holds by leket shekhopeya, that who can gather it only aniya kohanim, when you're gathering something from the field. You're constantly you're working on the field. So by mistake, you can put it in your mouth. Over here, no one is working. The ani doesn't work. The ani receives one large gift. Whatever it is you have as meiser ani, or however much of it you want to give to that specific ani, there perhaps no one is concerned that he will accidentally eat it. I want to make that's one important point. In other words, Rabbi Tarfon is concerned that when someone is preoccupied with harvesting, they'll put it in their mouth. When you receive meiser ani, you're not preoccupied. It's like the rabbi getting a check for the shul. You're not preoccupied. You're doing nothing. You're getting a check. There, even Rabbi Tarfon will hold that you'll remember that you're not allowed to eat it. Okay. Another detail, just to know, like I mentioned, the Meiser Rishon is a non-issue because the Levi gets it. The Levi is not allowed to eat it. He can sell it to the Kohen. I just want to say, by Meiser Sheni, it gets tricky. Why does it get tricky? Chevra, Meiser Sheni may never be sold. I know we're still learning in Masechtas Trumos, but we're going to have that rule. One is never allowed to sell Meiser Sheni. So even though you have to separate the Meiser Sheni has to be gifted to a Kohen. In other words, it has the chumras of both. But the Kohen can only eat it in Yerushalmi. The point the Mishnah keeps on making is that Gedulei Truma is only l'chumra, ki'ilu. You won't benefit any leniency by the fact that this is called Truma. So you have to pay the penalties from both sides. Okay. V'aniya Yisrael moichren eshelahem lakoyanim edmei truma, and they get to keep and they get v'hadamim shalahem. Okay, so that closes the clarification that gedulei truma is only for the rule that a non-kohen cannot eat it. Mitzad all other laws of agriculture, we treat it like we treat any other tevel. Mitzad sheni, once you give the gifts, the recipient of the gift cannot stam eat it. He has to remember midrabanan it's truma, with all the nuance like we just spoke out. Now the Mishnah is addressing, like we spoke out in the introduction. You're trapped. Why are you trapped? You want to thresh. So what do you do? Aviv, I don't know if you heard that part. The part is that animals are not allowed to eat truma. Midrabanan it's truma. So what would you say if you're threshing? Threshing means after you harvested it, you have these stalks laying on the field, on the threshing floor. Before you winnow it, before you separate the chaff from the kernel, they used to do it by throwing it up in the air, you have to separate the chaff from the kernel. And that's normally done by having animals trample on it. When animals trample on product, the Torah says you're not allowed to muzzle the animal. In other words, the animal has to have access. He's going to see it. Many people, they work the same way. You put food on the table. If they see it, they have to eat it. They can't help themselves. It's there. Animals are that way. So, and the Torah says, don't muzzle it. So what do you do over here? In other words, if you're not going to muzzle it, you're fulfilling a biblical obligation, but the animal is going to eat truma. To prevent the animal from eating truma, you have to muzzle that. You're not allowed to muzzle the animal. So what do you do? So the Mishnah says, ideally, hachoyvet, the word hachoyvet means someone who threshes with manually. It takes a lot more time. Would you take every kernel, every stalk, and you separate with your fingers. With a stick, or you bang it, or however you do it. So that will be meshubach because you have no issue with what do you do with the muzzling. But it takes a lot of time. So if someone, not everyone is mechuyev to do the hareza meshubach. So v'hadosh, but if you wish to thresh it in the usual way, so keitzad yaseh, what is the solution? So the Mishnah says, you should suspend baskets around the necks of the animals while they are threshing. And inside these baskets, exactly the same product that they are threshing. If they're threshing wheat, put wheat inside. If they're threshing barley, put barley inside. So the animal is going to see that type of food. Oh, you see the blinza, you got to eat it. That. He's going to see the barley, he wants to eat the barley, and he'll eat the barley from the basket. What you put in the basket is not the gedolei truma. The nimsa, so it's going to come that lo yizoymim es habehema v'lo yimachal satruma. You get both ways. You didn't violate the law of muzzling, and on the other hand, the animal, you did not allow your animal to eat rabbinic truma, which one is not allowed to do. Now, I just want to say bekitzer that you have throughout Shas. These are the words a machlokes between everyone and Rab Shimon bar Yochai, whether darshinan taima dekra or loy darshinan tama dekra. The ground zero of this debate is when the Torah says that when a person is lending money, and the norm then, at least, when you loaned money, is that you took a guarantee, you took an article as a guarantee. So the Torah says that if a person is lending money to a widow, he's not allowed to take an article as a guarantee. That's what the Torah says. Rab Shimon says that one is allowed to expound the reason behind these obligations. It's nice to have an insight. The Rambam says we are always obligated to look for a reason to the limit that we could. But Rab Shimon is saying something more. He's saying that we are allowed to darshan the reason, and based on that, we can start limiting or qualifying what God said. Rab Shimon says the reason why you're not allowed to take an article from a widow, what's the reason? Is because normally most people are middle class, they're not wealthy. The middle class would mean, let's say she gave as her article, she gave her mattress. Every night, you're obligated to give her back her mattress. She's going to come collect it. Then the next morning, she has to give you back the mattress. Or let's say to make a living, she's a baker. So she has a machine that needs, let's say. That's what she has. She has one. She's not a wealthy woman that has 50. So she's going to give it to you as a guarantee, but then when she has to work, you're obligated to give to the person who loaned you money. If the article of the guarantee is something that they need to make a living, you have to give it back to them during their work period. You got that? So Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is saying, you know what? You know why you can't take a guarantee? Because people are going to give a bad name to the widow, because they're going to see her going to this man every morning to give back her mattress, or every night to give back her work utensil. Then she's going to give it. She's going to be coming and going. It's going to give a bad reputation. People are going to think that something wrong is happening. And therefore, says Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, since this is the reason, we are allowed to say the reason. Therefore, it comes out that if the widow is wealthy and she has more than one mattress, if she has more than one work utensil, that means even if she gives it as the guarantee, she doesn't need to get it back. She has something else. She's never going to come and go. If she's never going to come and go, then you can take a guarantee. That's called darshin and tamad dekra. The chachamim say that loy darshin and tamad dekra. Even if what you're saying might be to some degree correct, but that's not the reason. And if God says don't do something, you're never allowed to do it. We paskin like the chachamim that loy darshin and tamad dekra. So when it comes, just as an example, and there are not many examples, when it comes to this topic, doesn't this sound like darshin and tamad dekra? God says don't muzzle the animal. We're going ahead and saying, the reason why you can't muzzle an animal is because when the animal is threshing and it's going to smell the food, and the animal is someone who doesn't have any self-control, she's going to want to eat it, and then he won't be able to eat it. So not to give the animal that tsar, you can't muzzle the animal. And therefore, you're allowed to put a basket under his mouth, even though the basket under his mouth won't allow him to eat from that which he is threshing, because you're circumventing the problem. And that would pose a problem, because that would mean that what the Mishnah is allowing for one to do is only following Shitas Rab Shimon. But that's incorrect. We learned about this somewhere in the Bavli. This called Darshin and Tamad Dekra, and then there is the Hagdara. These are the words of the Achrayim. The definition of the Dekra. And this is the definition. When it comes, the Gemara in Yavamas, the Akira is saying Yavamas, thank you. I didn't remember where it is, but there was a question in the Gemara if the animal has diarrhea, and him eating that food will be mazikim. And the Gemara says, in that case, you can muzzle the animal. And the Gemara there says, it's not because we're going Darshin and Tamad Dekra. The Gemara says, no, that this is the it's not like by Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai in the case of lending money. That's called already Tamad Dekra. Here, it's not called Tamad Dekra. It's called the very definition of Lo Sachsaim is Lo Sachsaim because the animal will be in pain. That's what God is saying. Everyone will agree to this din of the mission. This is a very interesting topic. When do we say it's called Tamad Dekra? When it's called the Hagdara Dekra? When are we, basically, we're saying that we can, God says don't do something, and we're right away taking it as a given that there are times that you could do it.
It's like that situation as basically being the equivalent of a muzzle.
Yes, it is.
You know, as I learned, I just felt like this is not not muzzle. It's just giving the animal a situation where it would never want to. Have to take
one can
you're killing both
one can argue, Rabbi Danny, that God wants the animal to eat from that which he's working with, and the animal here is not eating from that which he's working with.
That sounds like a stretch.
Okay, weiter. Anyways, we end in the Mishnah. Now we're starting with the Gemara. So the Mishnah began Hazareya Truma. So really, the first din is the first penalty of you planting truma, instead of doing what you're meant to do with truma, which is to eat it, yupach, you have to turn it over. Says the Gemara. Now, there's so many different ways of reading this shtickle. De la chilufin, I'm just repeating what I said when we learned the Mishnah. De la chilufin means, number one, yupach is not allowed to happen immediately after planting it, because the seeds that did not yet decompose are truma, and truma is not allowed to get destroyed. Remember that. So when are you doing the yupach? A little bit into the season. True, prior to the product reaching a shlish, but it's sometime into the season. Now you have to know agriculture. There is a window for planting. When you plant and now you uproot, normally, especially since they didn't have the type of access to water that we have right now, you will have to leave your field fallow for the rest of that season. That's the penalty. The lo chilufin means that since you're going to uproot it, it's not pshat that you're going to lose what you planted. It's much worse than that. Is that you won't be able to replace it. And that's a big penalty. Since you planted truma, don't just understand yupach, you're going to lose what you planted. It's more than that. He's just being practical. When you uproot it, for that season, that piece of land is going to remain fallow, and that's a very heavy penalty. Now that we said how big the penalty is, and the Mishnah also said that if mezid, the din is you're not allowed to uproot it. So now there's a big incentive. Normally, the incentive is when someone does something b'mezid, so they're incentivized not to get punished to claim, shoygig hoyisi. How ironic, here it's going to be the opposite. If someone planted it b'shoygig, now the Gemara says it's a big knas. You're losing what you planted and you're losing that land. That land will remain fallow. So what's to stop a person from saying that the mezid hoyisi? Rab Shmuel bar Avodimi boyi, he asked the Chevre, Mao she'einem loimin mezid hoyisi. If someone comes and says, no, I knew it was truma, will we believe it? So the Gemara says, it depends. Amrulei, im kishahayu makirim, if when he planted the truma, others knew that he planted truma, that means that we knew that there is a problem independent of him. What his intentions are, no one knows, whether he was shogeg or mezid. But if it's known that what he did is wrong, then a person will not be believed to say mezid hoyisi, because what's working against the person is knowing that he's incentivized to say mezid hoyisi to save this financial loss, so he loses his nemanus. Like in any other din, I'm not believed to testify regarding myself for my benefit. Then loy kol heimenu. But if no one even knew that what he did is problematic, and the only way we know what he did is problematic is because he is the one that notified everyone that I planted truma. So now we have to believe when he says, I planted truma, but I was amazed because of the rule, hapesha asaru hapesha hitin. And that's a rule that we have throughout Shas. If we don't even know there's a problem, the only source of that knowledge is from the person, we don't say palgin on dibura. Then we believe the statement that he makes. If we knew that there's a problem independent of the person, and a chanami, then that person has no halachic trustworthiness, ne'emanus, to qualify what his kavanah was in a way that it's advantageous to him.
A little strange.
Okay.
The way we were looking at this, I think, the entire time, was that there's some sort of connection between intentionality and the general knowledge that that's truma, right? The whole reason why we said if you did it on purpose, you have to leave it, is because then people are going to think that you're uprooting truma. That means there's a certain knowledge that comes along in the public with you doing it on purpose.
And that doesn't take away the exceptional cases. So what the Gabba is pointing out is that generally, how would people know b'chal what you're doing? Because you knew and you told people. So generally, and that was that whole link, mezid, why not yupach? Because people know that it's a field planted with truma. But there could be exceptions. Could be a scenario where it's known. Could be the only available grain was truma grains, and this worker didn't know. You're right, Danny. Right. Now, next question. Rabbi Yamin bar Gidoil asked the following. This is a big penalty. What happens if what you planted is only rabbinically truma? And for that, the Gemara gives two examples of only rabbinic truma. One example is the item itself, the quality of the item. Karshinim, in English called vetch, and Kevin is not here to put a picture. Vetch is a certain type of product that is primarily used only for animal fodder. And the rule is something that is gedule behema is bechlal exempt from all of the maisras. However, this karshinim, since when there's a famine, people eat it. Like in LA, dog food, people eat. So when you have things like that, midrabanan, you have to tithe it. It's the only obligation to the whole chiyuv of this product is midrabanan. So if someone had karshinim, and since midrabanan, you have to tithe it, you separated truma, and now someone planted that truma. Or another example, it's not about this specific item, but zara trumas chutz la'aretz. And as we know, that truma b'chutz la'aretz, not in the whole chutz la'aretz, but in Eretz Shinoir, in Eretz Mitzrayim, right? In Bavel, in certain lands adjacent to the Holy Land, rabbinically things have to be tithed. What happens if someone plants those truma items in the ground? Are we going to also penalize them with yupach? Are we going to penalize them that gedulei truma? And the Gemara says, no, we do not. So Amrulay, they told him that Gezeda refers to the type of truma. Kashinim, truma is only a Gezeda. Trumas chutzlar, it's Gezeda means it's a rabbinic law. And we have the big klal, ve'ein Gezeda l'Gezeda. Ve'ein Gezeda l'Gezeda. We don't have a double rabbinic law. Ubemele, I know there are exceptions, but that's the general rule. And where do we have an exception? I'll give you a great exception. Amir al-Akum. Amir al-Akum is a rabbanan. I'm not allowed to tell a goy to violate Isur Darabanan. There isn't a carte blanche heter. Oh, if it's only a rabbinic chilul Shabbos, you can lechatchila tell a goy. We don't say that, even though you can argue it's a gezeda l'gezeda. So we have exceptions, but that's the rule. Okay. Then the Mishnah says that even if you planted it b'shoigeg, once it reached a third or more, even there you're not allowed to uproot it, because since midarabanan gedulei truma. So now that it's already considered truma, upa, now you're not allowed to destroy truma. Now we're going to find something phenomenal. From when is something truma? Aviv, when does something become truma? From when it's designated by the owner. That's the general rule. From when can the owner designate something as truma? There's another rule. You can only designate it from when it got harvested. Even though you were not obligated right away when you harvested it, you have to normally wait until it's gamar molacha. But if someone was higdiman b'shibalen, if you designated it as truma, your designation is a designation. But what happens if the owner of product designates it as truma when it's still mechubar lakarka? It's nonsense. It doesn't do anything. But here we're having an exception. It's the fact that we're saying, now we understand that there's two important points when it comes to truma. Oinas hamaisres and gemar melacha. Oinas hamaisres means that if the product did not even reach a third, or the same in different words, if the product's seed, zera, is so underdeveloped, that means the product is so immature that if you harvested it that early, you won't be able to replant it. The seed is not strong enough for it to be able to be moiled, which is normally connected to the shlish, as we learned together in the Rambam. Then it's not shayich. There's no meiser here. Even if someone designated it as meiser, it's not meiser. Even if you designated it. Once something reached a third of its maturity, just for the record, a third of its maturity doesn't mean the third of the time, because from the third until the end is a lot very quick. We learned about this. Then you harvested it, then it's something subject to be tithed. But when are you obligated to tithe it? When it reached its final completed stage. Normally we say the words meruach, other times we say the iaspenei habayis. But coming back over here, the fact that the Mishnah says that once it reaches a third, you cannot uproot it, hada amra shehakedusha chalo alek shu mechubar, which is amazing. Because since gedulei truma, but at least you would think from when you harvested it. Why? Because if I have normal tevel, if I did not yet harvest it, not only if it reached the shlish, if it's fully grown, but if I declare it truma while it's mechubar, my words are nothing. They have it affects no chalois kedushas truma at all. Nevertheless, from our Mishnah, we see that the Chachamim's power of making this gezerah, that gedulei truma goes into effect the moment it reaches a third. If not, the yupach would go until when you harvested it. And that's a big chiddush. Again, pointing out how strict is this gezerah. So here we go, turning hada amra dafa peivav amid beis, that hefresh mi peido shloi hivi shlish loy kachu. So another thing, it's the fact that even though it's holy while it's connected, but it only happens when it reaches a third. So that is also in converse, that if something did not reach a third, normal tevel, normal produce, and you disconnected it, and you declared it truma, it won't be chal. Because if there would be a possibility for someone to affect kedushas truma on something that did not even reach a shlish, now that we established that our gezerah of gedulei truma goes even b'mechubar, then it should have happened even earlier. So it's gavaldik. So these are the foundational rules.
What is it? Does tevel apply to it?
It's not even called tevel yet. Very good. Now, will it be a product even healthy to eat? I don't think so. It's like eating a green banana. I don't know. I don't know if people ate it when they were starving.
If it shares the reverse, that even though it was already declared truma,
even though it was disconnected and declared,
planted it like loses its status.
One second, with the plant, we're not talking about something that was planted afterwards. We're talking about normal, what we on Peivav Amid base.
As a real truma, isn't that it became truma already?
Proper a biblical truma.
Then status once you
planted it, very good. And the Chachamim declared that it's truma as a knas.
Once it becomes third.
And only once it becomes izaraya. So since they did it even when it's mechuber, so why not before a third? Because before a third, nothing is shaykh to truma, which means that in a normal case, even if you harvested it and you declare it, it won't be chal. Ubemezid yupach. Ubemezid, now we gave one exception. One exception that even bemezid you have to overturn it, and we said that when it comes to pishtan, to flax, and the reason for that is when I plant normal flax, and we're talking about biblical truma, and I separated 2%, my kedushas truma goes both on the stalks and on the seeds. Don't forget that. By normal truma. Our rabbinic gezerah, that gedulei truma, by pishtan only goes on the seeds. It doesn't go on the flax. And that creates a chumrah, not a kula. You would think it creates a kula if it only goes on the seeds. So at least the flax, by the way, the fibers, which is primarily why people plant this for, comes from the flax. It comes from the stalk. It doesn't come from the seeds. But the chumrah that will be is that why can you not uproot it b'mezid? Because people know that it's a truma field. No, the flax is not truma, even though you're destroying the seeds. Since the kavana of people is primarily for the flax, that even b'mezid yupach. Konsubai, they found a penalty, shelo yehana bekesamim, for people not to benefit from the stalks, because they understood that if they wouldn't make that gezerah, then people would plant. People, they want to decentivize people from planting truma. Okay, chayev beleket. So we had these three shitas chachamim, right? Leket shikhampeya, and who can collect it? Anyone. Eloma, Daniya Yisrael are not allowed to eat it, but they get to sell it to a kohen. B'dimei truma b'zoil. So says the Gemara, Rabbi Yosi boy, and here the boy doesn't mean a question, an inquiry. Boy means a statement that hifrish oymarin sheloi. If a person separates some of his piles for truma, guys, I'm talking here about regular truma. You have tevel, and now you have them bundled up, and now v'nischal fuloi. They got mixed up with normal piles of chulin. What do you do over here? Again, if you have truma and chulin, you have a mixture, and then you forgot one of those bundles. We're not talking about the status of the mixture. We're talking about now you left one of the bundles. What's the issue? The issue is you left it because it might have been chulin. Truma is not chayiv in like a shikhampeya. But what you left might have been the bundle of truma. And what's the problem with that? Problem with that is that ani Yisrael is not allowed to eat the truma. So afilu kain aniya Yisrael v'aniya kahanim alaktim. Just like we have in our Mishnah, shitas chachamim, that they're not concerned that the aniya Yisrael, while they are preoccupied with harvesting, they might eat it. So whenever you have any other scenario, and he's giving you a biblical scenario, where you have a normal field and you bundle. Now he's saying there's a chiddush. Normally you only separate truma when it's in the meruach. The meruach is many steps after it's bundled. You only bundle it to take it to the threshing floor. Then you unbundle it. But if a person separated truma earlier on, and then when you came to pick up your bundles, you left, you did shikha, You don't know whether you left the regular shikha or whether you left the truma. So you're going to be machmer and you're going to leave it. But now, maybe what you left is truma. So just like the Chachamim in our Mishnah are lenient, Rabbi Yossi makes a comment, they'll be lenient there also. Even though there, it might be Truma Doiraisa. Doesn't make a difference. Doiraisa, the Rabbanan, the Chachamim trust that once the owner makes it known that there is a Chashash Truma here, even though it's Shikha, Leket is not Shayach by bundles. By the way, this has to be Shikha or Peya. And another thing, that normally Peya is not bundled. Peya, you don't bundle it yet. But if a person forgot to leave Peya when it's in stalks, then you're obligated to leave it afterwards. So it really doesn't go on the Leket part, but it goes either on the Shikha or on the Peya, that if there is a suffix, what it is, according to the Chachamim, we allow Aniyah Yisrael to pick it, and we trust them that they will then sell it to Kohanim. Rab Tarfon holds that we are afraid. And whenever something might be Truma, or here, Truma Midrabanan, we only allow for Aniyah Yisrael to pick it, because the Aniyah, only Aniyah Kohanim to pick it, because the Aniyah Yisrael might accidentally eat it while they're working with it, while they're harvesting. Now we're going to find other braises, or a braisa that speaks about a different case, and we're going to point out that Rab Tarfon will not agree to what we learn in the braisa. The Chachamim made a takana aviv that people during the times of the second Beis Hamikdash that did not make some sort of public formal acceptance that they will adhere to the laws of purity and impurity, which is how you become a chaver, by making a Kabbalah berabim, as we learned. If one did not do that, they have by default the status of an Am Ha'aretz, and rabbinically an Am Ha'aretz is always in the status of Tumah. One of the things that a chaver needed to undertake when he made that Kabbalah is that he's going to eat his chulin in a state of tahara. So the presumption is that if someone is a chaver, the items, the food he has in his house is tahar. If someone has the status of an Am Ha'aretz, then the rabbinic presumption or chazaka is that the food that they have in their house, it has the status of tumah. Now, Ishtoi shel Am Ha'aretz, if you have the wife of an Am Ha'aretz, and she wants to grind grain together with the wife of a chaver, okay, when can she do that? The wife of the Am Ha'aretz can only do it bisman shehi temeya. In other words, since she knows, let's say she's a nida, we are not concerned that the Eishes Am Ha'aretz will accidentally touch the food from the wife of the chaver, rendering it tamei. Why are we not concerned? Because something that they accepted that they're tamei, like she's a nida, then again, it's very, the Am Ha'aretz was not a person that did not, that went against the halachas at all. They were not so careful and they were lax. But if you were to tell an Am Ha'aretz, because you didn't make the formal acceptance, all of your food is automatically tamei, they did not accept that quick. They didn't see themselves to be tamei. So if she knew she's tamei, just an example, she's a nida, then we trust them that she will not accidentally be metama the grain of the Eishes chaver, and she can even grind together. Aval bisman shehi tohira, but when she's tohira means the very fact that she's an Eishes Am Ha'aretz, she always carries that rabbinic tumah. But aside of that rabbinic tumah, as far as she knows, she's tohira, and they did not accept that they are always tamei. So such a woman, says the Tana, loy titchain, that she's not allowed to work together with the wife of a chaver. Why? Shehi machzekes atzma tohira mimenu, even though be'emes she's not tohira. Now, I have a simple question. According to Rabbi Tarfon, what is Rabbi Tarfon saying? That while one is preoccupied with work, in our Mishnah, they will accidentally forget what they are working with. So says the Gemara that according to Rab Tarfon will argue on the Tana of this Braisa. Because uchedivrei Rab Tarfon afilu bisman shehi temeya, she also will not be allowed to grind with Eishes a chaver. Why is that? Because she might inadvertently be mitame the chaver's grain. Why? Because she's busy grinding. That's very important. Okay, beside it. In other words, what we're saying is that we applied Rab Tarfon to many other braises that did not quote Shitas Rab Tarfon. Now, when it comes to Rabbi Akiva is tricky. I know we quoted the Tosfos Yontif, but the Gemara over here actually is going to completely learn Rabbi Akiva differently. Now I went back to Daf Pei Vav. I just went back to Amud Aleph, and I'm reading inside the Mishnah on top of the Amud. Amar loy Rabbi Akiva. In our Mishnah, it says the words Im Kain lo yilaktu ela tohirim. When we had at some point in the past, the words Im Kain were not memorized by heart. The earlier Amoraim had Amar loy Rabbi Akiva lo yilaktu ela tohirim. Big difference whether Rabbi Akiva said the words Imkain or not. Why? Because there's two ways of learning Rabbi Akiva. Let me word it that way. Chachamim say that we're not afraid that the Aniyah Yisrael will eat. The Rabbi Tarfon says, yeah, when people are working, they might forget. So therefore, what does Rabbi Tarfon say? Only Aniyah Kohanim. If you have the words Lo Yilaktu Elo Tohidim without Imkain, then Rabbi Akiva is saying a third opinion. What is he saying to Rabbi Tarfon? Just like you are afraid that Aniyah Yisrael might eat, well, even Aniyah Kohanim, if the Aniyah Kohanim themselves are Tameh, I know a Kohen Tameh knows he's not allowed to eat Truma, but when he's working, he's preoccupied with work, he might forget. So Rabbi Akiva is saying a third opinion. I agree with you, Rabbi Tarfon, but I'm going to take it even further. We are concerned that whoever is doing the gathering might forget. So who can gather this Lekat Shechopeya? Only Kohanim Tohirim. However, says the Gemara, Rabbi Akiva said the words Imkain. Imkain does not mean that he agrees with Rabbi Tarfon. Really, the Gemara is saying that Rabbi Akiva agrees with the Chachamim. We have no concern. People are frum. People know that this is a midrabanan truma. No one is going to eat it, only kohanim. And no one will eat it, only kohanim tohidim. Who can pick it? Everyone. Rabbi Akiva is telling Rabbi Tarfon, according to you, that's the imkain. If you are afraid that people are going to forget what they're harvesting, why did you say aniyah kohanim? Imkain, you should have said aniyah kohanim tohidim. Rabbi Akiva, I don't agree with you. I agree with the Tanakama. That's because he said the words in Cain, and that's what the Gemara is saying. So says the Gemara, Cain, he must nisa. The right gears in our Mishnah is im Cain lo yilaktu el tohidim. The way we're learning the Gemara means not that Rabbi Akiva is a third shita. If he would have been a third shita, he would have said Rabbi Akiva oimed lo yilaktu el tohidim. He would have said what he's saying. Only kohanim tohidim. Why does he say the words im Cain? Im Cain is words that you ask to Rabbi Tarfon. The fact that he's asking to Rabbi Tarfon itself means, I don't agree with you, Rabbi Tarfon. I agree with the Chachamim, with the Tanakama. I'm not concerned that people are going to eat. But you who have this concern, you should have said even Tohidim. And like we said in the Mishnah, Rabbi Tarfon will answer, Kohanim Zidizim. We trust Kohanim. Yisraelim are not Zidiz. Let's go weiter. Quickly. We got 2 more minutes. Yeah, I want to finish the Amud.
Theoretically, eat someone's stomach, they could harvest it.
But they can eat it. I'm eating it. Yes. Very good.
I'm saying if you're not worried about the eating part,
Then yeah, very good. Very good. But the whole thing of Rabbi Tarfon is eating. Eating,
right,
very good. Then only Kohanim Tohidim. If you're afraid of eating, then why shouldn't you say that? It fits. So Cain he must need. So when we learned the Mishnah, we said, why didn't the Mishnah say Chayavas Betruma? And the Chanami, the Gemara says. So we said in the Mishnah, because the word Meiser is a very generic word. The Gemara says better. Kain he masnisa. You know what the right version of the Mishnah is? Chayeves betrumais uba Meiser sheni. Okay. And the final shtickle. Our Mishnah spoke about this. I know it's big, and we have a minute, but this is a big statement, Chavra. So we spoke about in our Mishnah, what do? You planted the truma, gedulei truma. So the Mishnah gave you a whole list, a whole shemagas board. Gedulei truma only means non-kohanim cannot eat it. But you're chayven like a shikhampeya, you're chayven truma, so meiser sheni, the answer whole Megillah. What happens? Similar but not the same. If you planted and we're dafka using davar she'ein zaroi kola. If you planted something that the seed does not decompose, as an example, we already know this. It's onions, it's garlic, but here we'll speak about the onions. Litra b'tzalim, you separated meiser. You have meiser rishon. How much meiser rishon do you have? You have 1 litra amount, but you did not yet separate trumas meiser. This is what happened. And this person planted that litra of b'tzalim. So there's a couple of steps that you have to know. Number one, that by midah oiraisa, even though that which you planted is forbidden because it's still tevel, because you did not remove trumas meiser, and even though the original, what you planted, is not decomposing, midda oiraisa, that which grows from it, remember this, we're going to have this many times, that which extends from the bulbs, midda oiraisa, is not considered aser, it's considered brand new tevel. However, midrabanan, we don't view it that way, which means that I want to go further. Midoiraisa, since that which extends is considered brand new tevel, once you have a majority of extension, it's mevatel the original. So you really resolve the trumas meiser. But midrabanan, but now that you planted 1 litro, what came out? As a litrin. So first of all, on the new, what do you have to separate? You have to separate harei elu chayavas b'meiseres. Let's just focus. I know we also have to separate truma, but I want to focus on how much do you have to separate from it? You have to separate, my sedition would be 1 liter from the 10. But you know what? You did not resolve midrabanan. The original litra never had from it a 10th removed. You have to do it right now. And from the original litra that you planted, mafrish trumas meiser aleim va'al mashenota. So you make 2 separations. First, you have to separate my sedition. And by the way, you separate my sedition, which is 1 liter. From that, you have to remove a 10th for trumas meiser. Midrabanan, you still have to resolve trumas meiser from that which you planted. Litra shel b'tzalam shel meiser sheni similar shenata. Again, midda eiraisa, whatever grows is considered brand new tevel. If whatever grows from the meiser sheni is more than the meiser sheni, it nullifies the meiser sheni. So you're good to go. But midrabanan, we don't say that. Vareba es a liter, now you have 10 liter in. So now, v'chayeves b'maisrois, you have to separate all of the maisres. However, even though biblically the growth is all considered chulin, we still have to deal with the meiser sheni. V'choize upoider es meiser sheni shenata, because midrabanan, the growth doesn't nullify the meiser sheni status of the original onions, and they have to be redeemed.